Hey guys, so recently on my channel I've been focusing on wizard build guides, and I've uploaded builds for open world, dungeons, raids, and also PvP battlegrounds. And these are the builds that I like to use, and I feel like right now they're the best in the meta with the new essence that we have. So overall, I feel like I've done a decent job just covering the best builds for the class right now. And I've been so happy to see that many people come to me and say, thank you so much for sharing the build guides. I've been using your builds and they're extremely useful. I've also noticed a few people using my PvP build in Battlegrounds and having great success with it, so I'm really glad to see that. But one thing which I haven't really covered on my channel and I haven't really seen being covered on other channels is guides for people who just switched over to the wizard class and it's their first time playing the class and they don't really have a starting point or which essence to start using and which essence to farm up the other essence with. So this is what I want to cover in this video. This is probably going to be the last guide that I do for Wizard for a while, because a few of you already know that I'm going to be switching over to another class, and if you want to see which class I'm going to switch to, then stick around until the end of the video. I'll be showing that. But like I said, what I noticed is that a lot of the guides on YouTube are kind of showing the most optimal essence to use, and they don't really give a starting point for players who haven't farmed up any of the essence and don't really know where to start. So this video is going to be for you guys, but even if you're a wizard veteran, I'd still suggest watching this video because it might be helpful for you when you're looking to construct your own open world build. Let's say you don't like the one which I have already, then this will prove as a good starting point for you to make your own build. So just to give you guys some background and my experience with the class, so I switched to Wizard at the start of the new year, and I feel like over the past 10 weeks or so, I've gotten a decent feel of it, and overall I would say that it's an extremely strong class in PvE, and it excels especially in open world farming. I'd say that from all the classes I've played so far, it's the smoothest class to play. So if you like to open world farm and search for those legendaries, then I'd say this is probably the best class to play. I actually took the class to Paragon 1200 world first, and I did it just in one day because of how good and how efficient this class is. For PvP, I would say that it's probably the swishiest class right now in the current meta, so it dies very quick. But what it lacks with survivability, I would say it more than makes up for in damage and CC, as well as all the different options that you have. You have quite a lot of variability with this class, which is really good to see. Not just in PvP, but also in PvP. There's just so many options and different builds that you can play. So if you'd like to check out all the different skills and essence, this is one of the best classes to do so. I would say that in PvP activities, it's pretty tricky to get it right and to master playing this class. In my opinion, the key is just that you need to develop a good sense of which situations will get you killed, because a lot of the time, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're going to die very fast without having a chance to do any damage. But if you work with your team and you position in the right way, you're going to have a chance to deal an insane amount of damage. So I actually switched to this class from the Blood Knight class, and obviously Blood Knight is probably the polar opposite in playstyle in PvP, because in Blood Knight you can go solo most of the time, and you can just go to the enemy backline and kind of do a lot of 1v1 fights and just clear out the whole backline, and it has really good survivability. So if you're a fan of the more melee playstyle and more tanky playstyle, then I wouldn't say this is the best class for you, especially if you're a PvP player. But if you're a person who can be very patient and have good positioning skills, then it's one of the best classes for PvP, I would say, as well as PvE. So that's kind of my mini review for the Wizard class. Sorry for going off on a bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to share my thoughts about this class overall. So I think to start off with, just to give you guys the most value, let's just take a look at the starting essence for the Wizard. So if you've just switched over to this class, this is the legendary essence that you're going to get.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
So let's just take a closer look at this legendary essence that you get once you class transfer. So the first piece is the helmet, which is crushing weight. This gives you a 10% damage increase for 4.8 seconds after casting teleport. And it also works in synergy with the perfect situation, which gives you a 30% increased movement speed after casting teleport. So these two essences are actually pretty okay, I would say, especially if you're planning to use teleport. You've got two essences that synergize straight after switching class. You've got these two which synergize with teleport, so it's really good to actually keep teleport on your skill bar while farming, at least in the beginning stages, before you switch to something else. And for the chest, you have meteor radius increased by 29%, This chest is actually pretty bad, and it's not really useful. So you've got this Pants Essence here, Thunderous Applause, which lets Meteor move with you while you're farming. And this is probably one of the best Pants Essence to use, but I wouldn't suggest using Meteor skill at all, unless you've found this essence and extracted it. So this chest for now is completely useless, and I don't suggest using Meteor in your open world build for now until you unlock that Pants Essence, like I said. So next, let's move on to the Pants Essence, the Crystal Guards. This says Ice Crystal cooldown decreased. This is probably one of the most useless essence for open world farming. This is a good essence for PvP, but in general, Ice Crystal, the skill itself doesn't have any good essence for open world farming, and I don't suggest using this skill at all. So that replacing these pants is kind of the top priority, I would say, for this open world farming build. Next, we've got Force of Arrakis, which also isn't a great essence for open world farming. Generally, you don't want to be using primary attack too much unless you really need the extra damage in open world farming. But I would say that Magic Missile, even if you were using primary attack, Magic Missile isn't the best one. You've got a choice between a Magic Missile and Electrocute, and Electrocute can leap towards additional enemies, whereas Magic Missile can't. So Electrocute is generally the skill that I like to use for open world farming, just because it has that extra AoE potential. But like I said, you don't really want to be focusing on doing damage with your primary attack, since you can't move while using your primary attack as Wizard. It's not really advisable that you focus around making an open world farming build with your primary attack. So next, let's move on to the second main hand essence, the Old Rustic, which reads, Lightning Nova also increases your primary attack speed by 30% for 4.8 seconds. This is an okay essence. Like I said, you don't really want to be focusing on primary attack damage, but this is actually a decent one. I wouldn't say it's completely useless, because most of the time you will need a bit more extra damage until you farm up all of the essence and essence mastery. So this is actually an okay essence to use, especially since it works with Electrocute, and it will increase the attack speed of your Electrocute when using a Lightning Nova. So next we've got the Unrepentant Gale, which is the first offhand essence. Maximum Arcane Wind charges increased by 1. Again, this is really not a very good essence to use, especially at the starting point. Arcane Wind isn't really one of the best skills to use, especially for open world. In PvP, it's a very good skill to use since it has CC potential, but in PvE activities, I really wouldn't say it's good. The only time where it would be okay is if you find the main hand essence, which is the new main hand essence, which lets you summon a bird, which says Arcane Wind now summons a storm bird that follows you and charges at random enemies. This can be okay, coupled with this essence, because you'll be able to summon 2 birds at the same time while farming, which is really good. But yeah, I wouldn't suggest, I would suggest switching out this essence unless you find the main hand essence, in which case you can switch it out for one of these and it would be okay to do so. The second offhand essence is Siphon. Now, thank God that we got this essence, because this is probably the most useful essence in the build. It reads, casting Lightning Nova temporarily increases your movement speed by 60% and also gives Lightning Nova a cooldown. Now, I'm going to stress this. Lightning Nova for Wizard is probably one of the best skills to use for open world farming. In fact, I would go so far as to say that Lightning Nova has to be probably the best skill to use for any PvE activities. This is because a lot of your movement speed is coming from a Lightning Nova. So you have 2 options for Lightning Nova. You either use this offhand, which will give you the, like let's say I cast Lightning Nova like this. I have this burst in movement speed, which is extremely good. The other option is to use the Sprite Spark chest, which you won't have when you first class switch, but this is probably the best essence. You're able to find it through the loyalty bonus as well. It would be extremely useful. This reads, Lightning Nova transfigures you into a ball of pure lightning, allowing you to move at high speed and continually deal damage. So if we just equip this, I'll show you guys how it looks. So once you do that, you've got this kind of really nice skill. You can see I have almost no downtime while using it, and you'll be able to move through all of the mobs while dealing damage as you pass through them, and also having the extra movement speed. And the best thing about this chest is that you actually don't need to be using the Siphon. So even without the Siphon, you've got this extra movement speed. So let's just switch it to something else. I'll switch it to the same essence here. You can see I've still got this movement speed. So that's because if you look at the extra details of Sprite Spark, you'll be able to see here that from the chest, Lightning Nova transfigures you into a ball of pure lightning, increasing your movement speed by 50% for 2.5 seconds and dealing damage to nearby enemies. So this is kind of an all-in-one essence. Like, it's got both the effect of the Siphon and also Lightning Nova damage. I would say this essence is extremely powerful, and I'm really glad to have this essence on Wizard because it makes the class so smooth to play. So this is the priority. I would say if you take anything away from this video, is that this essence is really overpowered and really strong, and you should try to find this essence as a priority. So it's safe to say that this essence setup isn't the best. There are some useful essence like the chest, the shoulders, and the offhand here, but most of these essence are pretty useless for open world farming and just to get you started. Obviously, when you switch to Wizard or any new class, you want to be saving some of these mystery legendary items and then redeeming them and using them all up on the new class just to get started with some new essence. And you also want to be gambling Yakin, the NPC in Westmarch, just to get more essence rewards. The last thing you want to do is also select a loyalty bonus, which is not available for me because I have all of them, but you want to be selecting things like the Meteor Pants, which I already mentioned, or the Sprite Spark. But let's just assume that you have no legendary saved up and you have to start with this essence. There are some things which you can control, which is the set bonuses that you use and also the legendary gems, which I'll quickly talk about. So for the sets, I know I said that primary attack isn't really great to focus on if you want to do damage in your open world build, but I would still recommend using a 4-piece Vithu. The optimal setup that I use for open world farming would use only 2-piece Vithu for the beneficial effect duration. Having 2-piece Vithu is extremely good in your open world build because a lot of the buffs that you do, you want them to be increased, such as the buff which gives you movement speed on your Lightning Nova. You definitely want that to be increased. But for now, I would say that you should use 4-piece Vithu and either 4-piece Flagellum or 4-piece of the new Angmet set. And this is a good setup just to get started because you will have to use primary attack just to get a bit more damage from your starting essence setup. For the legendary gems, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. Just go for damage gems. Pain Clasp is obviously insanely good. Mother's Lament, Blood-Soaked Jade is really, really good. Bottled Hope is really, really good. And then any 1-star or 2-star, other 2 stars that give you damage are really good. I'm not going to spend too long. I've talked about this in my other videos, so you can watch those if you're interested. The last thing I would recommend is to go for Weaver Paragon Tree. Normally, I wouldn't recommend going for this in open world because, like I said, you don't want to be using primary attack too much, but in this case, we will be using primary attack in our open world setup. So Weaver will just give us that extra kick of damage which we'll need to make open world farming bearable at this point until you get extra essence. So as for the skills for this starter open world build, I would suggest using Teleport. This works well with the helmet and the shoulders essence. Lightning Nova, obviously, this is insanely good with the Siphon offhand. And it also gives you primary attack with the old rustic main hand, which you kind of want to replace, but it's okay for now. Then you want to use Arcane Wind. This is not really ideal, but since you have the maximum charge and it doesn't take too much time to cast the skill, you can just kind of spam it like this. Then Arcane Wind is an okay option. And then lastly, you want to use Meteor. This is the wizard skill that probably does the most damage just in a single hit. And the only essence that you have to use with it is the chest, which I don't really recommend. But for now, this is what we have, so we'll just make do with having Meteor. So for the primary attack, I'd recommend to use Electrocute rather than Magic Missile. So I know you do have the main hand, the Force of Crackers, which increases the damage of Magic Missile, but I feel like it just doesn't do enough damage. It just does damage to a single target, which is decent, but Electrocute has this chance to leap to 3 additional enemies and deal 30% as much damage to them. So it's definitely recommended to use Electrocute if you're open world farming, just because you can strike multiple enemies at the same time. So now I'm going to go over the playstyle of how this build plays. You obviously want to be using Lightning Nova every time it's off cooldown, and then you want to be also using Teleport once every 8 or 9 seconds, just to activate this buff here, which will last for 5 seconds, giving you 10% increase damage, and also the buff for the shoulders, which will give you extra movement speed. So for Arcane Wind and Meteor, you kind of just want to be weaving those in just to get your stacks of Weaver and also deal a bit more damage since they cast instantaneously. But most of the damage is going to be coming from your Electrocute while you're running, and it's going to have the 4-piece Vithu buff, as well as from the old Rustic main hand, which increases your primary attack damage every time you cast Lightning Nova. So let's just do a few rotations here. So obviously, while you're still weak and you don't have much power, I'd recommend running with your friends, not running solo. But if you have to run solo, then this is a decent build just to get you started. And the key is just to keep moving as fast as possible and keep using your primary attack while weaving in damage from Meteor and Arcane Wind every now and then. And don't forget to press teleport just to get your not lose your kill tree, and also keep your buff active from your helmet. So you can see I'll just do a couple of rotations here, and it's doing pretty decent damage. My Electrocute is leaping towards extra enemies, as you can see, and I'm just clearing through the packs here. But this will get a lot smoother, and you won't have to rely on primary attack at all, and you'll just be able to move through these enemies once you farm a couple of essence. So this is the build for now. If you do already have a few essence, now I'll be going through all of the different essence and different options for open world farming. But you can see I just got an orange, and I think this is the first orange of the day, so it's nice to have a legendary. But for now, I'll end there. This build isn't really going to be the strongest, like I said, and please do run with your friends if they're available to run with you. So obviously, if you just switch class, everyone's progression is going to be different, or everyone's going to find essence in the same order. But I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible and give kind of universal advice for how I like to think about open world builds, just so you guys can construct your own open world build based off the RNG that you get and the essence that you get, and just for the overall playstyle that you want to play. So what's the goal of a open world build? Well, the goal is to just move as fast as possible and deal as much damage as possible while moving through enemies. So if we just take a look at the skills here, we have 5 different slots. And obviously we have limited number of essence, legendary power, which buff these skills. And we've got 8 different slots. So I've kind of theory crafted kind of all the different permeations and all the different options that we have and the game's given us. And there's 2 slots which I would never change across any open world build that I would use. And that's the primary attack. I would always keep it as Electrocute. I've already talked about why. Magic Missile is extremely good in dungeons, but for open world farming, my preferred choice is Electrocute, and I would never recommend changing the skill. To be honest, at the end of the day, you're not going to be using either of these primary attacks, so it doesn't really matter. But to start off with, I would never change this from Electrocute. Like I said, once you get the correct legendary essence, you won't have to use primary attack at all, and it will just be these 4 skills that make the difference. So for now, let's just ignore the primary attack slot and focus on these 4 skills. So with these 4 skills, the goal is, like I said, to get as much movement speed as possible. So we want to be capped at 70% movement speed, and also we want to be doing as much damage as possible. So the one skill which I wouldn't change, and I think you guys know what's coming up, is Lightning Nova. Lightning Nova is by far the most important skill to have, because this gives you the biggest boost. In my opinion, it's the best mobility skill that Wizard has. And I would recommend always using Lightning Nova in any PvE build that you have. It's just so flexible, it can do damage, it can help with your movement speed, like I already said. So I think since most wizards can agree that Lightning Nova is by far the most useful skill, we obviously want 100% uptime of Lightning Nova. And that's why, in my opinion, I think the most useful essence to have for Lightning Nova is the Frenetic Spark. This will give you 18.6% cooldown on Lightning Nova once you have Mastery 4, and it will just allow you to reach 100% uptime of Lightning Nova. The other things which will allow you to reach it are obviously 2-piece Vithu, which increases your beneficial effectuation, and also having cooldown rolls on your set items also helps a lot. The other really important essence, aside from the Frenetic Spark offhand, is the chest essence that you choose, and also the secondary offhand based off the chest essence that you have. So like I already mentioned at the start of the video, the best way to gear for Lightning Nova is to have the all-in-one chest essence, which is Sprite Spark. So this is probably the second loyalty bonus priority after Frenetic Spark, is to go for this Sprite Spark. because this basically allows you to have the movement speed without using the Siphon Essence. So if you don't go for Sprite Spark Chest Essence, you can go for any of the other Chest Essence for Lightning Nova, and they'll all buff it. So you have the Ice Lightning Nova, you have the Fire Lightning Nova, you have the Arcane Lightning Nova. There's just so many choices because I think 60 to 70% of Chest Essence for Wizards are based around Lightning Nova. But if you were to use one of those, you'd have to use the Siphon Essence, which you get for free, thankfully. So depending on what you find as your first chest essence from the essence drops, you can always use Siphon with any of those chests. Or, like I said, the better option is to go for Sprite Spark once you find it, but you always should go for the Frenetic Spark offhand just to maintain the 100% uptime of Lightning Nova. This is probably the most crucial part of open world builds, is just to have this 100% uptime of the 50% or the 60% movement speed, depending on the combination that you choose to go for. So before I move on from Lightning Nova, I'd like to give an honorable mention to Thunderbird's Bite main hand essence. And this essence is pretty useful if you do find it and you don't have any other good main hand essence, so I definitely recommend using it just to buff your Lightning Nova damage further. Lightning Nova isn't really the main damage dealer in open world farming builds. The priority of it is just to have the 100% mobility uptime. The damage is nice and is an extra added bonus, so if you do pick up this essence, then you can also use it if you'd like. So let's move on to talk about the second skill slot in the build. So I like to think of this as the Helmet Essence skill slot, and this is because this is the skill that's going to be buffed by the Helmet Essence, but to be honest, the Helmet Essences won't make or break your build for the wizard, and you can actually replace this. It's kind of flexible. You can replace this for any skill in the second damage bucket, which I'll be talking about later when we get there. But for now, let's just think of this as the Helmet Essence slot. So you have 3 different options. You can either go for Ephemeral Visage if you find that helmet, and this will increase your movement speed also by 20%. So if you remember, if you found Sprite Spark in for Lightning Nova, you'll be able to pick up the extra 20% movement speed from Ephemeral Visage, and also it will make your continual damage effects deal damage 60% faster. So it's definitely really good if you manage to find that helmet. If not, then don't fret, because there's quite a lot of different options. So you could go for Teleport, which is a very good option because, as you know, we already get Crushing Weight helmet, and also we get the Teleport Increased Movement Speed shoulders. We get both of those essence for free, so Teleport is actually a very good option to have here, just to get a little bit extra movement speed, a little bit extra damage buff for your skills. The last option, which also if you find and you want to play around with, is using Scorch skill, and using that with the Sunfire Crown helmet. That's also a decent option if you want to try out the new essence, but I feel like that isn't quite as strong, and there might be some better options if you want to deal damage, which I'll talk about later. But those are the 3 options which I'd recommend for the skill. So now that we've talked about the first and second skill slot, which is the chest and also helmet essence skill slots, I want to talk about the third and fourth skill slots, which are Damage Bucket 1 and Damage Bucket 2. That's how I like to think of them. So Damage Bucket 1 is related to the helmet and shoulders essence, and Damage Bucket 2 is related to anything that's left over, which is the main hand and offhand essences. So Damage Bucket 1 actually does the most damage. They're the skills which do the most damage. And for this Damage Bucket, there's 2 skills which come to mind, which I really like to play with. And these are Meteor and also Disintegrate. So for Meteor, you need, obviously, like I said, shoulders and pants essence. So the required one is the pants essence for Meteor, is the Thunderous Applause pants. And what this does is basically it turns Meteor from, instead of it being an instantaneous skill that you can only cast in a specific area once, you're able to basically run around with Meteor following you the whole time, and it's raining meteors from the sky, and it hits all the mobs around you. So I'd recommend that if you find that pants, then it's a very good idea to use Meteor as your primary damage dealing skill. And you can pair that with the shoulders essence. Either go for Stag of Ill Will, which is probably the best. This gives a damage buff for 3 seconds after casting Meteor, so all your damage is going to be increased for 3 seconds. Or you can go for the Shoulders of Cataclysm, which gives an outright damage buff to Meteor, which is also decent. But for mobile players, this is the skill that I would recommend actually as the primary damage dealing skill, because the problem is if you go for Disintegrate, which I'll talk about the essence for them. It's obviously bugged right now for mobile players, and it's dealing more damage on the PC client, but I hope that Blizzard will fix it soon. There's been multiple bug reports, and I think content creators in the partner program have already alerted the developers. So with that said, let's move on to talk about Disintegrate. So for Disintegrate, the required essence are both the pants and the shoulders. The shoulders is the Crystalline Shadow, which basically turns your Disintegrate into a Arcane Deputy, which follows you around and will auto aim at enemies and also deal a lot of damage to them. And the Pants essence is the Hasten Oblivion, which basically allows you to have 100% uptime of Disintegrate, which I've talked about in my other videos, and it's an extremely powerful combo. Especially if you're a PC player, I would recommend to use this probably over Meteor, but to be honest, both perform really well. It's just that I would avoid this one if you're playing on mobile, like I said. So finally, I want to talk about the fourth skill slot, and this skill slot is what I like to call Damage Bucket 2 skills. And the skills include Arcane Torrent, Arcane Wind, and Ice Armor. So these three skills have a lot of potential for doing a considerable amount of damage. And bear in mind that you can kind of replace them interchangeably with the second skill slot and also the third skill slot, depending on the essences that you get, and they'll also work just fine as long as you have Lightning Nova kind of handling your movement speed. Then you can have 3 skills doing damage or just 2 skills doing damage. But the best setup is obviously to have a main damage dealer like Meteor or Disintegrate, like I said, and then having a support damage dealer. But it's very flexible if you want to change it up. So the best skill to use, in my opinion, for this slot is Arcane Torrent. This does the most damage and is the most consistent. So for Arcane Torrent, the essence you need is the Rift Carver essence, which is the main hand essence. And this is the only essence that you need. You don't really need any other essence. There is the Arcane Torrent Pants essence. There's, I think, 3 of them which buff the damage of it and work with Rift Carver very well. But obviously, if you've already found the Pants for the third skill, which is Meteor or Disintegrate, then you don't have space to use the Pants for Arcane Torrent, so I'd only use it if you haven't found those essence yet. So moving on to the second best skill to use in this slot, I would say is Ice Armor. So Ice Armor, the good thing about it is that it only occupies 1 slot. It's the offhand slot, and there's quite a lot of good options you can use. There's the Bluster Bauble, the Winter's Eye. So both of these essence kind of have the same effect. I think the Bluster Bauble does slightly more damage, but the Winter's Eye also has the same effect, and it does slightly less damage with a chill effect. Both are really good. They do an AoE effect around you, which kind of follows you around your character. So as you move through mobs, it's going to do a lot of damage. Other good options include Heart of the Storm and Dancing Lightning, which works with your pets also. So it just depends what essence you find and what combinations you want to make. They're all very good options. The last option which you could use is Arcane Wind, like I said. The good thing about this is that you get an offhand essence which increases the charge of Arcane Wind, but Arcane Wind as a base attack doesn't do that much damage. You could use the main hand essence, which is the Astral Feather, which spawns a bird, and you could run with 2 birds, which actually does a pretty decent amount of damage, but in my opinion, it's just not as consistent as Arcane Torrent, and the cooldown's a bit longer, but it's still a decent option, especially if you combine it with the Dancing Lightning from the Ice Armor. That's about everything that I wanted to cover for the skills setup, and I've kind of run through all of the different options that you have for open world builds as fast as I can. There are a few skills which I wouldn't recommend using just because they don't have any good essence that makes farming smooth and farming up essence smooth. And these skills include Black Hole. It's just a bit too clunky. In PvE, it does have a really good Helmet Essence and Offhand Essence, which works very well in dungeons, but in open world it's just a bit clunky, and the base effect does CC, which is good in PvP, but it's not useful at all in PvE. So I wouldn't recommend using Black Hole. Frostfield, this skill got buffed, but I'd say it still needs some help with the different essence. I feel like it's a very good essence in vaults, but other than that, it's not really so useful, and I don't recommend using it in PvE. Next, we have Ice Crystal, which you get the Pants Essence for, like I mentioned, when you class switch. But this skill is not good at all. Unfortunately, it works very well with Disintegrate in PvP, and is probably my favorite skill to use in the battlegrounds. Combined with Disintegrate, does huge damage. But in open world farming, I wouldn't really recommend using it. And the last skill, which I wouldn't really recommend using, is Ray of Frost. Unfortunately, there's just not any good essence which allows you to channel it while moving, like you have with Disintegrate. Disintegrate actually doesn't require you to channel if you have the Shoulders essence, which just lets you have an Arcane Deputy and shoots the beam. There's no such essence for Ray of Frost, and doesn't seem like there's any good options to use it in PvE. But in PvP, it does have its place, and you could use it there. But just to start off with, when you first class switch, I wouldn't recommend using any of these skills. So once again, that's Black Hole, Frost Field, Ice Crystal, and Ray of Frost. So let's quickly talk about the loyalty bonus essence priority. Loyalty bonus is kind of a meme, but I'm going to go through it anyway. So I already said that Lightning Nova is probably the most important skill to get right first. So for that, you'd need the Sprite Spark chest essence and the Frenetic Spark offhand. I'd probably go for the Frenetic Spark offhand if you haven't got that yet, just because that gives you the most value. You could honestly use any of these other Lightning Nova chests along with the Siphon offhand, and they'd work just fine. So just go for Frenetic Spark offhand, just for the Lightning Nova cooldown. It's very versatile. Once you've got that sorted out, you can go for a damage bucket 1 essence. So that's the shoulder and pants essence. So either you go for Meteor or Disintegrate, like I said. If you're a mobile player, then you'd have to go for Meteor. So you'd want to go for the pants essence first, which is the Thunderous Applause. So this will allow Meteor to move with you. This is probably the most important one to get. Once you have that, you can work towards getting the Shoulder Essence, this one, the Stagger of Ill Omen, which will buff your damage after casting Meteor. Once you've fixed your damage bucket 1 skill, you can then go for damage bucket 2 skill. So I personally go for Rift Carver. I feel like this is the best secondary damage option. So it would be with Arcane Torrent. And once you've sorted that, you can then fix your Helmet Essence, which is probably the least important one, but it will help a lot. So if you do want to go for slow time, then obviously just go for the Ephemeral Visage helmet. And if you want to go for teleport, then it's fine. You already have the teleport essence. If you really want to try out the Scorch new essence with the snakes, then you could go for the Sunfire Crown, even though I think it's the worst option, unfortunately. But yeah, that's about it for the priority for the loyalty bonus. Once you've got all of those, then I'd probably recommend going for the dungeon setup. And like I said, you can check out my dungeon guide to see the essence that I'm using there. But the important thing is just to get yourself in a position where you can comfortably farm open world with the class and get all the essence that you need. So I'll end the video by showing my favorite open world builds for PC as well as for mobile. So since I've already talked about the skills and the legendary essence choices, I'll quickly talk about the set choices in them, as well as the Paragon tree and also the magic attributes which I like to have on my gear. So first of all, let's start off with the open world PC build, which is the one I made a guide for last week. This build is very strong and it uses the Disintegrate new Shoulders essence to deal damage, which does a lot of damage on PC. The secondary essence is Rift Carver with the Arcane Torrent. And then it's using Lightning Nova, obviously, Electrocute, obviously, and also Teleport just as a movements with the helmet, which is also very good because you get the damage bonus. For the sets, I'm using 2-piece Vithu, which is definitely a must for open world builds. This is really required just so you have the 100% uptime of Lightning Nova. The other sets are all kind of optional, but I like to use 2-piece Banquet. This 15%, you have 100% uptime of it if you play the build correctly, and it's very, very strong. Then I either like to use the Angment set or the Flagellant set. Here I'm using the Flagellant set just because I'm using Disintegrate and it performs very well. But for the mobile build, I'm using the Angment set. Since I'm using Meteor for the mobile build, the Ignite bonus from the 2-piece Angment works very, very well with Meteor. For the Paragon tree, I'm using Warden for both of these builds. And the reason for that is it gives you the size bonus, which gives you increased movement speed, which goes over your 70% movement speed cap. But when you first switch over, you're going to be lacking damage, so I'd either suggest using Weaver Tree, which is what I recommended at the start of the video, or Vanquisher Tree is also decent. In case you're not using primary attack so much, Vanquisher Tree will give you an extra boost of damage. For the magic attributes, I would recommend going for cooldown and movement speed on your set items, and for the legendary items, critical hit chance and critical hit damage is the most important, and then on the chest and pants you want to go for beneficial effect duration. Just before I end the video, I do want to give a quick shout out to Apollyon Gaming. So this build is actually straight from his channel. It's the Godspeed one touch one kill, the old build which he was using. This is the build which I actually followed and used when I first switched to Wizard, just to get Paragon 1200. This build performs extremely well, and I'd still recommend using it on mobile, to be honest. It's very, very strong. So if you want to check out the full guide, I'll link the video for that guide also in the description and the comment section. Do give him a subscribe. He does upload quite a few good guides for Wizard, as well as some other very good content. So this build works pretty similar to my PC build, except it's using Meteor to deal most of the damage, and instead of the teleport essence, it's using slow time with the slow time main hand, and it's giving the 20% extra movement speed, so you can kind of relax a bit on your movement speed rolls for your sets, which is also very, very good. So with that, guys, I think I've covered everything that I want to cover. Hopefully this video has been helpful for all the new players that have just switched to Wizard. As always, you can check my favorite builds for Wizard on my channel. I've got them all uploaded once you've farmed up the essence that you need. I'm thinking about making this video kind of a series for all of the classes that I play, and just to give my review and my thoughts to help people get started with the class. If this video is useful, then do leave me a comment. So like I said at the start of the video, this is probably going to be my last Wizard guide for a while. If the next major update has some huge changes for Wizard, then I will be covering them in another video, but for now I'm going to be switching class. And if you're wondering, the class I'm going to go for is going to be Crusader. So I'm going to go for that based off the community poll that I made. I want to thank everybody who voted on my channel. The response was overwhelming, and a lot more people voted than I thought. There were over 200 people that voted, and the majority vote was 31% in favor of me picking Crusader. Don't worry if your class wasn't picked. I'll be going through all of them and playing every single class and making guides for them as I go along. But probably for the next couple of weeks I'm going to be sinking my teeth into this class and just trying to get a feel for it and how it plays. So I'm really looking forward to that, and also to be farming up all the essence and getting up to Mastery Essence 4 and trying out all the different builds. But for now, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I'll be signing off, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.